Andrew Jackson. Imagine a president who looks at a Supreme Court ruling and throws it in the bin. Yes, that was him. In 1832, the Supreme Court ruled in Worcester versus Georgia that the Cherokee Nation was sovereign and protected by federal treaties. The decision was clear and binding. Andrew Jackson ignored it. The ruling existed on paper. Enforcement depended on the president. Jackson chose not to act, and the court had no way to stop what followed. 2 years earlier, he had signed the Indian Removal Act, giving his administration power to relocate native tribes west of the Mississippi. The law described negotiation. The reality was pressure, constant and deliberate. Treaties were pushed through using coercion and manipulation. The Treaty of New Echota, signed by a small faction without authority, gave legal cover. It passed the Senate by a single vote despite public opposition. Then came removal. By 1838, Cherokee families were forced from their homes at gunpoint and marched west. Supplies failed. Disease spread. Winter closed in. Around 15,000 were displaced. Thousands died along the route that became known as the Trail of Tears. And it didn't stop there. More than 60,000 Native Americans across multiple tribes were removed under the same policy. Entire regions were cleared. Jackson didn't lose control of events. He set them in motion and kept them moving. Indeed, he governed by instinct, grudge, and personal loyalty. George W. Bush. During his time, the United States went to war based on intelligence that didn't hold up. On February 5, 2003, Secretary of State Colin Powell addressed the United Nations, presenting satellite images, intercepted communications, and diagrams of alleged biological weapons labs. The message was clear. Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. The full weight of the U.S. government stood behind that claim. 43 days later, American forces invaded Iraq. Baghdad fell quickly. Weeks later, Bush stood beneath a mission accomplished banner and declared major combat over. The war was only beginning. No weapons of mass destruction were ever found. The intelligence collapsed under scrutiny. Then came the occupation. The decision to disband the Iraqi army and remove Ba'ath Party members left hundreds of thousands of trained men without jobs or direction. An insurgency formed. Violence escalated. American casualties rose. Abu Ghraib exposed the abuse of detainees, and the images spread worldwide. And at home, the pressure mounted. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina struck the Gulf Coast. New Orleans flooded. Thousands were stranded without food, water, or aid. The federal response stalled, and the failure became public in real time. The war dragged on. The damage spread across two fronts. He launched a war on false pretenses. He left the city to drown. By the time he left office, the economy was collapsing too. Warren G. Harding. He handed America's oil reserves to his friends, and his friends sold them for cash in a black bag. You see, after winning the presidency in 1920, Harding rewarded political allies with powerful positions. One of them was Albert Fall, his Secretary of the Interior, a man he trusted with control over federal land and resources. Fall moved quickly. He arranged for key naval petroleum reserves to be transferred from the Navy to his department. Then, without public bidding or oversight, he leased drilling rights to major oil businessmen. One secured access to Teapot Dome in Wyoming. Another gained control of Elk Hills in California, fields worth enormous sums. The deals weren't clean. In return, money began to flow back. Large payments were routed through intermediaries. One arrived in the form of Liberty bonds. Another came as cash, delivered in a black bag. Fall used it to expand his personal wealth. The operation stayed hidden at first. Suspicion grew when drilling activity appeared where it shouldn't have. A Senate investigation followed. Records disappeared. Testimony stalled, but eventually, the financial trail surfaced. The scheme collapsed. Fall became the first sitting cabinet member in U.S. history to go to prison. The leases were voided, and control of the reserves was restored. Harding never faced the consequences himself. He died before the investigation closed in. He surrounded himself with thieves and called them friends. The government paid the price. Herbert Hoover. He ordered the U.S. Army to remove World War I veterans camped outside the Capitol. By the summer of 1932, the country was deep in the Great Depression. Millions were unemployed. Banks had collapsed. Bread lines stretched across cities. In that climate, thousands of World War I veterans made their way to Washington, demanding early payment of bonuses they had been promised, but wouldn't receive until 1945. They came by train, on foot, with families in tow. By June, up to 25,000 had gathered, building a sprawling camp of tents and scrap wood across the Potomac. They called themselves the Bonus Expeditionary Force. They were unarmed and largely peaceful. The House passed a bill to pay them. The Senate rejected it. Many left. Thousands stayed. They had nowhere else to go. Then came July 28th. Hoover ordered the army to clear the camps. General Douglas MacArthur led the operation. Soldiers advanced with bayonets fixed. Cavalry units followed, and tanks rolled through the streets. Tear gas filled the air. Camps were set on fire. Families ran. 2 veterans had already been killed earlier that day. A baby died from gas exposure. Hoover told the army to stop. The advance continued anyway. By morning, the camps were gone. The images spread across the country. Public anger followed. The man who once led food relief across Europe couldn't bring himself to feed his own veterans. Donald Trump. For over 150 years, every defeated president accepted the results and walked away, until one didn't. On January 6, 2021, a joint session of Congress convened to certify the results of the 2020 presidential election. The outcome had already been confirmed by every state, upheld by more than 60 court rulings, and validated by Trump's own attorney general, who said the Justice Department had found no evidence of fraud sufficient to change the result. The process should have taken a few hours. That morning, President Trump addressed a crowd of supporters near the White House. He repeated his claim that the election had been stolen. He told them to march to the Capitol. They did. By early afternoon, rioters had breached the Capitol building. They smashed windows, fought police, and roamed the halls carrying Confederate flags, zip ties, and tactical gear. Members of Congress were evacuated. Staff barricaded doors. A protester was shot and killed trying to climb through a broken window near the House chamber. Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick collapsed after being attacked and died the following day. 4 other people died in the chaos. Trump watched the assault unfold on television. Aides, allies, and family members begged him to intervene. Hours passed before he released a video asking supporters to go home, while telling them, "We love you," and repeating the stolen election claim. He had already become the 3rd president in American history to be impeached, the first time for pressuring Ukraine's president to investigate a political rival. The second impeachment, for incitement of insurrection, made him the only president ever impeached twice. Beyond January 6th, Trump's presidency carried a distinct pattern: the separation of migrant children from their families at the southern border, the dismissal of intelligence agencies' conclusions on Russian interference, the firing of inspectors general overseeing pandemic relief, and a COVID-19 response that saw the president publicly suggest injecting disinfectant while more than 400,000 Americans died before he left office. He was the first president since the Civil War to refuse a peaceful transfer of power. The tradition held for over 150 years. It took one term to break it. Franklin Pierce. One signature erased a 34-year truce and turned an entire territory into a war zone. Since 1820, the Missouri Compromise had held a fragile line: slavery below 36 degrees 30 minutes, free states above. It was flawed, but it kept the country from breaking apart. Presidents before him had treated it as untouchable. Franklin Pierce signed it away. In 1854, he backed and pushed through the Kansas-Nebraska Act, replacing that line with popular sovereignty. Settlers would decide for themselves whether slavery would exist in their territory. The shift didn't settle anything. It invited conflict. Pro-slavery settlers moved in from Missouri. Anti-slavery settlers arrived from the north. Both sides came armed. Elections were manipulated. Rival governments formed, each claiming legitimacy. Violence followed. Towns were attacked and burned. Armed groups clashed in open conflict. In one of the most infamous incidents, abolitionist John Brown led a retaliatory killing of 5 pro-slavery settlers. The territory descended into chaos. The press called it Bleeding Kansas. It became a testing ground for the Civil War that would follow. Pierce didn't contain the crisis. He backed the pro-slavery faction and allowed the situation to spiral. His own party turned on him, refusing to renominate him for a second term. He opened a wound that couldn't be closed with votes. It took a war. Richard Nixon. He won 49 states and lost his presidency to Watergate, and it all started with a break-in. On June 17, 1972, 5 men were arrested inside the Democratic National Committee offices at the Watergate complex. They carried wiretapping equipment and cameras. They were tied to Nixon's re-election campaign. Months later, Nixon won in a landslide. The break-in hadn't been necessary, but what followed made it worse. The cover-up began. Nixon approved hush money to keep the burglars quiet. He worked to block the FBI investigation, using the CIA as leverage. As pressure mounted, he fired the special prosecutor, triggering the Saturday Night Massacre. Senior officials resigned rather than carry out the order. The administration turned inward, targeting opponents and tightening control. And he recorded everything. The White House taping system captured thousands of hours of conversations. When the Supreme Court forced their release, the truth came out. One recording showed Nixon ordering obstruction just days after the break-in. The House moved toward impeachment. Charges included obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and contempt of Congress. Facing certain removal, Nixon resigned in 1974, the first and only president to do so. The presidency didn't collapse overnight. It was dismantled piece by piece. He told the country he wasn't a crook, but the tapes said otherwise. James Buchanan. 7 states left the Union on his watch, and the president argued it was illegal to stop them. He entered office in 1857 with one job: hold the country together. Tensions over slavery were already tearing at the Union. Kansas was an open conflict. The Supreme Court had just deepened the divide with the Dred Scott decision. The moment called for leadership. Buchanan didn't provide it. He aligned himself with pro-slavery interests, backing the Lecompton Constitution in Kansas despite clear opposition from settlers. His actions deepened divisions inside his own party and across the country. Then came secession. After the 1860 election, South Carolina left the Union. 6 more states followed within weeks. Federal authority was collapsing in real time. Buchanan responded with hesitation. He claimed secession was illegal, but also that the federal government had no power to stop it. That position left him with no action to take, even as federal forts and arsenals were seized. His administration weakened further from within. Officials resigned. Resources were lost. Control slipped away. By the time Abraham Lincoln took office, the Union was already breaking apart. 7 states had formed a new government. The country was on the edge of war. The worst president in American history didn't fail because he chose the wrong side. He failed because he refused to choose at all.